4 things authors ignore when they're stuck. Let's get into it. Hi. Welcome to the Quitcast. Let's just jump right into this content and start with number 1. Last time we talked about the 4 mistakes authors often make when stuck, and this time we're going to talk about 4 things that authors often ignore. Here's number 1. This first one you are not going to like because it's going to be along the it feels like it's not rocket science lines, but just hear me out on this one. Number 1, way too many of us ignore the fact that we are hungry, tired, or thirsty. It's pretty incredible when you look at the statistics. Like if you were to sit on my shoulder while I coach a whole bunch of authors, because I've coached more than 6,000 authors in my career, and I am actively coaching every single day, all day long. And if you were to sit on my shoulder and listen to people talk about their process of writing, so often you would hear and physically often see also a fatigue, a physical fatigue that is overwhelming. And often I will ask questions like, when was the last time you ate? Are you regularly drinking water? How is your sleep pattern? In fact, we teach a productivity class, and that's often the thing that we have to talk about the most is like, are you sleeping? Are you tired consistently? Are you hungry? Are you drinking enough water? And we always think those things don't matter because, of course, they're just biological needs. How could they affect anything? But they affect our cognition so much. And I would also include in this number 1, a little bit of when we're feeding ourselves food that isn't good for us, that's not good for our cognition. I mean, and this is not a health and wellness discussion. I promise this is the only time I'm going to talk about it. But so often we are caught in these patterns and loops, and they are forcing us to make bad decisions. And when we make those bad decisions, it's having an effect on our cognition and our ability to write. So even just in that way, I would say it's so important to pay attention to, have you had a nap and a snack, basically. That's number 1. The second thing that authors often ignore is that for many of us, our characters are also real people. So they feel real to us. They have real emotions. We respond to them as though they are real. And so we ignore the fact that they're real, and that causes a couple of different problems. When you ignore that they have real emotions, it will often make you, if you're wired in certain ways, will often make you stop wanting to write them at certain points in the book because they're going through things that are very difficult. So if you're ignoring the fact that they have real emotions and that you feel those as though they're real, so again, some of us, not all of us, but some of us, then that can cause us to stop writing completely. And so we are not making progress because we're not aware of the fact that we just don't want to sit in those emotions with them. And in order to get them to the place where they're not having the emotions anymore, we have to write those emotions. And so it's catch-22. And so the second problem that can cause when you ignore the fact that characters are real people to you is, think about how well you understand someone when you know them for 2 days. Pretty hard to make predictions about their behavior when you've known them for 2 days. There's still a lot they can do to surprise you. What about when you've known them for 2 years, 20 years, right? We instinctively know with real people, we get better at judging their behaviors and understanding their behaviors the longer we know them, because we have more of a chance to observe their patterns. And yet, so many of us are expecting ourselves to know our characters from page 1 or 2 or 5 or 10, the same way we would know them on page 200. And that's just not realistic. And so often we have to fumble our way through that process because we just don't know them well enough yet. And we're going to come back and rewrite. And no amount, for people who are wired this way, no amount of pre-planning is going to solve this. You're still going to have to get to 65 or 75% and realize the thing that they've been hiding from you, or that you now understand. You're going to have to go back and rewrite. So just be one with it. It's okay. All right. That's number 2, ignoring that the characters are real people to some of us. Number 3, ignoring actual real people exist and real life events actually exist. This is a painful one because I feel like we've discussed this in other places and not everybody wants to hear this again. But I'm just going to say, if you are at all empathetic, whether you have the harmony strength or the empathy strength or the positivity strength in Clifton strengths or not, if you are just at all empathetic and you're affected by the emotions of other people or of the people around you, and they are struggling, or the world is on fire, or things are in pain, it is very hard for many of us to compartmentalize that, regardless of what gender we are, regardless of what age we are, whether we're parents or not. But again, like on a personal level, the more affected you are by other people's emotions, the more likely you are to get stuck because of them. So when we ignore the fact that the world's on fire around us, or that the people are on fire around us, or that things are very tense, or even sometimes very exciting. Like I sold a house recently. It was really hard for me to write during that week that I was selling the house. And it wasn't stressful, like all the really bad stress, which I will tell everyone about at some point because it was nuts. But all the really bad stress had happened before that. And once I knew that was over, it was all just excitement and, looking at houses on Zillow and my new neighborhood and trying to figure out where I wanted to live and all that. That was exciting. And still, it was hard to write that week, even though I'm on deadline. But it was just so hard to write because the emotions were so high. I had to keep reminding myself, you're ignoring real life, you're ignoring real life, right? Like I had to remind myself of that because the tendency is to judge myself when I'm not doing a good job at whatever it is I think I'm supposed to be doing. Anyway, the reason I bring this up, especially around the ignoring part, is that we will go looking for ways to fix other problems instead of acknowledging that this is the problem we need to fix. And sometimes what we need to do to fix this is to cut off communication with certain people, or not go on certain social media, or not open emails, or not whatever, don't watch the news, so that it can help us be more productive, right? So, and again, assuming we want to be more productive during that time. But when we ignore that, it can be a detriment for us. So ignoring that real people and real world events have real consequences in our writing life as well is number 3. Number 4 is going to be painful for some of us. I'm just going to warn us. If you are at all yellow dominant in any of your strengths, your Clifton strengths, metric strengths, or if you care about influence and impact, don't cover your ears, don't stop paying attention, but just know, okay, I'll get into it quickly just to make it fast. When you have released a book that doesn't sell, when you have released a series that's not getting sell through, when your sales have not been what you want, when the outcome of your newsletter has not been positive, when you get a major critical review, all of those things have the potential to impact you because you are ignoring that outcome matters to you. And outcome doesn't matter to everybody. Some people can get these hits and it literally doesn't bother them at all. But if you are dominant in any of the influencing strengths, if you are a trailblazer or a drafter in the right to market archetype continuum, which we'll talk about again in future videos, but which is essentially people who are very conscious of whether people are following them or not, whether people are paying attention to what they're doing or not. If you are any level of influencing strengths, if you are high in strategic, if some of the executing strengths are this way, or if you just care about influence at all, it is normal to be affected by this. And when you ignore the fact that critical review derailed you for a long time, or the way that the book release has derailed you, and you just can't make yourself not care about that, then you have to face that place in yourself, right? And sometimes you can do something like, we have a free post on the Patreon where we talk about this, where I talked about how clearing your emotions about a situation can often help you to see if there's anything that you can do about it. Because sometimes in this particular situation where you are either influencing or impacting primary, the desire to have people follow me and participate in what I'm doing and care about what I'm doing, that desire can be so overwhelming sometimes that it can demotivate us completely from being able to write or make progress in the story. So often when we get blocked on a book, and I hear this kind of language when I'm coaching somebody, I'll say, are you sure you should keep going on this path? Because what happens if this book also doesn't do well, or what happens if, etc.? Like, you're stopping yourself from making forward progress because the last book or two or three or the bad review or whatever is being so painful for you that you're not able to make progress. And so the question then becomes, would it be easier or better for you to just switch to a different project or put this aside, etc.? But when we ignore how much we care about impact or influence, it can make us make decisions only from a vacuum, which is to say, you're only thinking about what would the strategic decision be to make if it didn't matter, if nothing else mattered at all about what I do. Like, if my personality didn't matter, if my preferences didn't matter, if my capacity didn't matter. And we can't ever make those decisions, by the way. It just seems like we can, because we listen to somebody really strategic give a workshop or talk on a podcast, and we're like, oh, that sounds like such a great idea, I'm going to do that. And then when it conflicts with something about us, we completely derail, because it's like, why can't I make this happen, when the answer is literally because it's not for you. Like, that thing is not a thing for you to do. And it's not like I'm saying there's something wrong with you. I'm saying that thing is not yours. Like, that's not what's going to make you successful. Do something else. That's something else is what's going to make you successful. But when we ignore how much we care about that, and essentially all of this fourth part is ignoring how we are wired. Like, we think that it shouldn't matter how we are wired. And not only should it, but you can't make it not matter. And a lot of us would love for it not to matter, but it can't. It is going to be the decider often in so many situations. So many times when we're stuck, we're ignoring the fact that there's a wiring part of us that cares more about the impact that the book didn't make, or the project or class didn't make, or the video or TikTok or, whatever didn't make, and we're not able to continue. And we just won't face that and accept it and do something different. And so that is a lot of the process of being stuck for some of us who really care about impact and influence. And the best thing that we can do with all four of these is to accept them and make plans that include that. And it's so important to know, when you're a person who needs to make plans in order to succeed, like you really like the laying out of plans, it's so important to know that you can be both accepting of the failure or the frustration or the stuckness or whatever, and also still successful and happy and whole and focused, and and the outcome can be positive. Just because you accept the failure doesn't mean you are a failure. Just because you accept the lack of impact doesn't mean you're never going to have impact. It's just what has happened in the past. It's just information. So the more we can accept it and work with it and just acknowledge it, the more likely we are to be able to find an outcome that includes more of the success that we want, but just not in the way that we thought it was going to happen. So anyway, I need to stop rambling. Thank you so much for being here and listening to this. I hope that you have I hope you have been helped by this, and I hope that you have enjoyed this as well. Please consider joining our Dear Becca newsletter, which every week we put out a newsletter that has a coaching letter in it. And if you ever want to submit a letter to that, you can. And I write a coaching response to a question every week, and we release those, and you'll get them in your inbox if you sign up. And it allows you to ask some more in-depth questions if you can't afford one-on-one coaching. Additionally, we do a live coaching every month. It's usually at the beginning of the month, and that's also free. And it's available on our Crowdcast, and there should be a link here as well. If you're following us on either Facebook or Patreon, the links will go out there too. So you'll be able to get them pretty much anywhere. All right. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that this has been helpful for you, and I will see you on the next podcast. Bye, everybody.